The topic for today, mindfulness of thoughts, is a key skill taught across many different types of current research-supported therapies, including ones you may have heard about or participated in, like cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, or dialectical behavior therapy, DBT. The lesson for today uses worksheets that you can find in Marshall Linehan's book, DBT Skills Training, Handouts and Worksheets, Handouts 15 and 15A, on pages 123 through 125. So to begin, I wanted to share a story about myself to highlight the skill we'll be learning today. In the past few weeks, I've decided to stop procrastinating with caring for my health and making excuses for why I don't have time to exercise. So I started attending yoga classes. Prior to 3 weeks ago, I had never done yoga in my life, but I had a thought, this will be easy. I'm flexible and young. When I showed up to yoga and looked around, I was surprised by the wide age range of people present. The teacher stood at the front of the room with all the students facing her and slowly guided us through various poses. In one specific pose, the teacher came to me and did a hands-on adjustment to correct my body posture and gave me a block to lean on as I was becoming unsteady. Though I was feeling confident before this event occurred, the following thoughts almost immediately jumped into my head. I'm doing something wrong. I look stupid. She knows I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I shouldn't come anymore because I'm not good at it. I'm definitely not coming anymore. While this was only a split second in time, these thoughts colored the rest of my experience in the yoga practice. If I had listened to these thoughts, what do you think might have happened? I might have got up right away and walked out right there and then in the middle of class, which probably would have been even more uncomfortable. I might have never returned and continued to live a sedentary life making excuses for why I couldn't exercise. I might have even decided I'm doomed to a life in which exercise is not relevant, begin to eat lots of junk food, and develop diabetes or other health problems. In fact, this is not what happened. While the thoughts were bothersome in the moment, I returned to yoga and in fact have gone back about 5 or 6 out of 7 days a week for the past 3 weeks. Do I still get some of those thoughts? Certainly, but mindfulness of thoughts is a skill we can learn and use to allow the mind to do whatever it naturally does, which is produce commentary or thoughts about whatever is happening while noticing what the mind says is not necessarily a fact and does not need to control our behaviors. So, while we'll get into the details of what exactly this skill is, why it's useful to you, and how to implement it, the main teaching point today is this. Thoughts are not facts, and learning to observe our thoughts for what they are, just thoughts, allows us the freedom to not be unnecessarily controlled by our thoughts, which means 1, to suffer less from our thoughts, 2, to increase our effective behaviors, and 3, to decrease impulsive or. So where does mindfulness of current thoughts fit into my therapy? So DBT has 2 main overarching goals, acceptance and change. With these overarching goals, there are 4 primary skill areas to learn. 1 is mindfulness, 2, distress tolerance, 3, emotion regulation, and 4, interpersonal effectiveness, all of which are acceptance and change-oriented skills. Mindfulness of thoughts is both a type of distress tolerance skill and also an emotion regulation skill with several components. Mindfulness of thoughts requires a balance of both accepting what is happening right now in the moment, including the thoughts that come into our mind, while changing the relationship to thoughts by seeing them for what they are rather than seeing the world through them, like the thoughts are a pair of sunglasses we were wearing and didn't even know it. So what exactly is mindfulness of thoughts? First, it is noticing and radically accepting thoughts. For example, to practice the noticing thought skill, close your eyes and listen to the words I say. Up, good, pink, salt. What thoughts or images came to your mind just now? For many people, when I said up, they might have had a thought of the word or a picture in their mind pointing down. For others, when I said good, you might have had the thought of the word bad, and so on. Our mind is very good at filling in the blanks if given the opportunity. Your challenge is to begin to notice what the mind produces throughout the day. It might be the thought of a word, a phrase, a feared image of your future, or a judgmental statement about something that you did today. We want to start noticing the things our mind comes up with as just contents in the mind, rather than taking these thoughts as facts. 2. Mindfulness of thoughts is changing our relationship to thoughts. Observing thoughts is about changing our relationship to our own thoughts, rather than changing the thoughts themselves, reacting immediately and impulsively, or clinging to unhelpful thoughts without being able to think clearly or act skillfully. Painful, uncomfortable, or distressing thoughts, both true or false, go through everyone's mind at some point. Our task is to find a way to relate to negative or painful thoughts so they do not cause us so much suffering, control our lives, specifically by controlling our behaviors. Unlike other therapies like traditional cognitive behavior therapy, mindfulness of thoughts in DBT is not about changing the specific nature of thoughts, but being willing to have and accept whatever thoughts arise and take them for what they are, as just thoughts in any given moment. And 3, mindfulness of thoughts is not emptying our mind of thoughts. Both secular and spiritual mindfulness practices have noticing current thoughts as they come and go as a key part of practicing mindfulness. Everyone who learns to meditate or to be mindful to the present moment will get distracted occasionally by thoughts at different times, more or less distracted or pulled by certain thoughts. Many people, even therapists, mistakenly believe and perpetuate the myth that when practicing mindfulness, they should suppress or stop thoughts. They mistakenly believe the goal of mindfulness practice is to achieve or have an empty mind. This is not humanly possible and couldn't be further from the true goal of any mindfulness practice, including mindfulness of thoughts. When human brains function properly, meaning if you're alive and conscious, your brain will generate all types of thoughts, beliefs, assumptions, judgments, interpretations, labels, and so on. The point of mindfulness of thoughts is to notice these thoughts without becoming attached to the literal content of your thoughts or without pushing the thoughts away. So why should we practice mindfulness of thoughts? Growing amounts of research show that trying to stop, block, or ignore thoughts actually makes the thoughts worse, and these difficult thoughts will increase in quantity. So 1, many people unnecessarily suffer because of their thoughts. They are controlled by the content of their thoughts and take their distressing thoughts as reality. When we take our thoughts and believe them as if they were real, we may engage in unhelpful behaviors like impulsivity driven by thoughts, ineffective communication with others leading to poor interpersonal relationships, and harmful self-injurious or self-destructive behaviors. But it doesn't have to be this way. 2, mindfulness of thoughts allows us to gain some distance or separation from the content of the thought and look at its function as a product of the brain, an integral part of being alive. This separation makes it easier to figure out what is a thought, what is a fact, and what is your emotional reaction to the thought you're having. 3, this skill helps us see thoughts for what they are, temporary. They are sensations of our mind which come and go. All thoughts are temporary, like sensations of an itch or of stubbing your toe. A certain thought might come back into your mind often, but it is still temporary. Like a wave, it comes and goes. 4, this skill helps us reduce our automatic reactions and emotional reactivity to thoughts, because when we react to thoughts as if they were facts, we muddle our ability to see accurately thoughts as thoughts, emotions and emotions, and our environment for what it really is. For example, if we were climbing a mountain and reached a huge pothole, it wouldn't be helpful to ask why the pothole was there, become upset by it, harm ourselves because it won't go away, or cry endlessly because it's there. Rather, it would be effective to find a way to get across the pothole to continue up the mountain. Similarly, mindfulness of thoughts allows us not to be trapped in a war with our emotional reactions, urges, or unhelpful behaviors in response to thoughts, but rather gives us a tool to effectively participate in the world despite our distressing thoughts. 5. Mindfulness of thoughts teaches us and helps us learn through our direct experience that thoughts are not unbearable or catastrophic, even if our mind tells us they are. Observing your thoughts, keeping your attention on them even when it's difficult instead of avoiding the thought or distracting from the thought, can help you become less reactive to thoughts. While it is true that events in life can be catastrophic, thoughts about the events are not themselves catastrophic. And number 6, this skill frees us to make choices in line with our values, in line with our goals, to use helpful, effective behaviors rather than being controlled by our thoughts. All right, so let's talk about how mindfulness of thoughts relates to pain and suffering. Before this slide, I mentioned how thoughts can cause suffering for many. It's helpful to understand how this works in order to use the mindfulness of thoughts skill to unhook from thoughts. According to the cognitive model of emotions shown on the figure on the left, activating events, A, lead to thoughts, B, and thoughts can lead to both emotions, C, and overt behaviors, also C. Fusing with negative thoughts, B, can therefore magnify distress caused by adverse events, which can lead to ineffective or impulsive behaviors. The mind frequently plays tricks on us, no matter how intelligent we may be. Inaccurate thoughts happen to everyone, and we tend to have extreme confidence in these inaccurate thoughts. One example of this happened to me when my mother came to visit recently. I don't see her very often because she lives in Northern California, and while having dinner one evening, she was sitting on the couch near the dining table, gazing in the direction of the dining table where my husband, sister, and I were seated and eating. She was quiet at the time and had her phone in her hands. When I looked over my shoulder and saw her looking in our direction, the thought, "Mom is so judgmental. She's even judging how we eat right now. She always does this. I'm probably even eating wrong somehow. I can never be good enough for Mom," raced through my head. Had I fused with these thoughts or been sucked in by them and believed them as facts, I would have become angry and irritable, likely got up from the table from dinner with a sister who I also rarely visit with, said a snide comment to my mom, and would have stormed off to my bedroom until dinner was over. How effective do you think this type of behavior would have been if I listened to the thoughts I was having? Not very. The figure on the right is the same as the figure on the left, but it shows how mindfulness can break the links between events in our lives, the thoughts we have, the emotions we experience, and the behaviors we actually do in the world. What this looks like in practice is during that same dinner I just told you about, I took the context into consideration, which was the fact that I had not seen my mom in about a year. I observed the mind-reading thoughts I had and noticed that my mind wanted to catastrophize what was happening, which was simply my mother gazing in my direction. Instead of allowing these thoughts to drive my behaviors and erupt impulsively, I checked the facts by politely asking my mom what she was looking at. She responded that there were some flowers on the counter behind me, which reminded her of her childhood garden. By checking the facts out loud with her, I was able to gain direct evidence that my thoughts were actually not only unhelpful, but totally inaccurate. This helped modify my emotional experience as well as my behaviors in the moment. So now you know what mindfulness of thoughts is and why it might be a useful skill for you to use, but let's dive deeper into how we can practice this skill. There are a few components needed to help you in your practice, which are observing your thoughts, adopting a curious mind, remembering you are not your thoughts, and not blocking or suppressing thoughts, letting thoughts come and go as waves. Let's go further into each one. So observing thoughts. There are probably an endless number of ways to go about observing your thoughts. I used to watch I Love Lucy, an old comedy from the 50s. In one particular episode, Lucy works at a chocolate factory with her friend Ethel, wrapping chocolates and placing them on a moving conveyor belt in front of her. Interestingly, the faster Lucy and her friend tried to wrap the chocolates, the more chocolates would come at them on the conveyor belt and the faster they would come. This is similar to when we try to quickly do away with our upsetting thoughts. We tend to have more of them, which are even more upsetting. To observe your thoughts, imagine your mind is that chocolate factory, equipped with the tools to make lots of different types of chocolates. Imagine your thoughts as small drops of chocolate. Certain thoughts might be a different flavor, shape, or size, but your mind serves them up to you one by one on a conveyor belt in front of you. You don't need to do anything to the thoughts or the chocolates. Just practice watching them as they come by you on that conveyor belt. If a thought is particularly upsetting, for example, one thought I had recently was, oh no, I didn't pay my rent on time this month. I might get kicked out of my apartment and have nowhere to live. Just watch that thought too, without trying to throw it off the conveyor belt, push it away from you, or do anything at all to it. Just let that particular flavor of thought come and go, noticing it until a new thought comes by on that conveyor belt. Another way you might practice observing your thoughts is simply by labeling them. So if you have a thought like, my kids hate me, you can say instead, I'm having the thought that my kids hate me. Notice that having the thought that your kids hate you is different from the actual experience in real life of your kids hating you. You can put this label, I'm having the thought, or I'm having a judgment that, or I'm having a memory thought that, and this can be used for just about any thoughts we have. You might also practice labeling image thoughts, sensory thoughts, or any other type of category of thoughts you experience. What other types of labels might you come up with to observe your thoughts? A few other suggestions for practicing this component of mindfulness of thoughts is on this slide for your reference. Next, adopt a curious mind. Have you ever seen a toddler go to the beach for the first time, or try a new food, or go to a new place? See if you can bring the curiosity of a young child experiencing something for the very first time to your thoughts. You might use discriminative observations, which describe the duration of thoughts. For example, the thought I just had lasted longer than the one before it. But try not to use evaluative judgments like, that was a good thought, or that was a bad thought I shouldn't be having. In this practice, all types of thoughts are welcome. Your job is to be curious about each one, noticing different qualities about it. Most children who are experiencing something for the first time are not judging the experience. Their experience is so new, there's only complete wonder. See if you can bring that same quality of wonder to your own thoughts, holding each one very lightly and gently moving on to a new thought when it comes. Remember, you are not your thoughts. Another important part of this practice is to remember you're not your thoughts. Remind yourself that you have had thousands of thoughts in your lifetime so far and will have thousands more. All of those thoughts are gone. You are not gone. You are not your thoughts. One way to remind yourself you are not your thoughts is to practice mindfulness of thoughts by using words and voice tone. Specifically, you can verbalize your thoughts or beliefs out loud, using a non-judgmental voice tone, repeating the thought over and over again until the sounds seem to slur together and completely lose their meaning. You might say the thought out loud as fast as you possibly can, 10 times in a row until it similarly loses its meaning. You might even try using a different voice tone than yours, either a very high or very low-pitched voice like a cartoon character or celebrity. Another thing I like to do with my thoughts when I'm practicing this skill is to sing my thoughts to the familiar tune of the ABCs or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. You can choose to sing your thought, no matter how difficult the thought seems, to any song you like and just observe what happens. Let's backtrack a little bit. So sometimes we all wish we didn't have a certain thought. We might feel sad, angry, or scared at the same time we have certain thoughts. Many people mistakenly think that thoughts are the cause of their negative emotions or their suffering. Thoughts are just thoughts. Some people who believe thoughts to be the same as facts may become upset when they have certain thoughts. The skill of mindfulness of thoughts allows us to see all thoughts for what they really are, as thoughts. Importantly, we want to practice welcoming all of our thoughts, whether they are thoughts we label as acceptable ones or whether they are thoughts we label as unacceptable ones. If you find yourself categorizing some of your thoughts as unacceptable, ask yourself what sensations are these thoughts trying to avoid. Return to the thought and purposefully turn your attention toward the sensation instead of away from it. Come back to your thought even if your mind tries to tell you you shouldn't. Repeat turning towards your thoughts and sensations over and over again as you practice. Another way you can practice turning towards your thoughts is by using opposite actions to the thought. For example, if a difficult thought shows up, purposefully relax your face and body while accepting your thought as only a thought, which is a sensation of your brain. If a thought tells you, avoid doing that task because you'll embarrass yourself, practice acting opposite to the thought, as if you did not believe the thought, by doing the task anyway, even while your mind keeps telling you not to. You might also imagine the things you would do if you stopped believing everything you think. What would change in your life? So to wrap up, now you've been introduced to the skill of mindfulness of thoughts, what it is, how it's useful for many people, and specific ways to practice. It's key to practice because the more you practice the skill, the easier it will become for you to implement, especially when you have difficult situations in your life, need to be able to assess a situation quickly and clearly, and act effectively. I recommend you set aside at least 10 minutes daily using a timer to practice your mindfulness of thought skills. You may even practice more or spontaneously throughout the day. More practice will help you become more effective in your daily life. You can also refer to worksheets 15 and 15A in the DBT Skills Training Handouts and Worksheets, which reviews the same skill we covered right now and can be another reference to your practice. Thank you for listening.